Hey there, it's Casey. I wanted to include this little note at the top of this episode. It's about 2 minutes long. Please listen to the whole thing because I think it's a very important topic based on recent conversations. Something I share with many of the founders, executives, and creative people I coach is what I call the affliction of I got this. The affliction of I got this shouldn't be confused with confidence. Confidence is our friend. I got this overcorrects and skews confidence into thinking we are solely responsible for all our success and all of our failures. Symptoms of I got this may include occasional isolation, overwhelm, and too much lonely computer time. I got this also triggers unnecessary comparison, mindless scrolling, Dairy Queen soft serve binges, and excluding others who only want to help our cause. On a recent trip to France, I was hiking up to the medieval village of Ez. It was a brutal climb up about 2,300 feet, but about 2/3 of the way up, I read a sign that was inspired by the writing of philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. I don't know if you tripped over him in college. The phrase that knocked me on the head was this, quote, "Our superhumanity is found in our friendships," end quote. It completely refocused me on the profound impact of relationships. Sharing all we create with others is what makes life and business meaningful. So I don't got this, and frankly, you likely don't either. But the good news is we probably might got this. Has anybody ever typed or said that sentence? In the coming weeks, This Epic Life explores the themes of community, allies, and rallying circles of people to widen and deepen our impact. We've also built something I would have killed to have as I left my corporate career to support our family with This Epic Life. The only hint I could share right now is this. A soul-powered business or career is as close as your tightest circle of allies. Thanks for listening, and today's guest is one of my favorite success stories of building a massive following by doing the work you love. I'll see you on the other side.
Ooh, this beat is epic.
Welcome to This Epic Life podcast, where we explore the connection between building a conscious life and building a conscious team or a conscious business. We also break down 3 powerful permissions with our guests. These would be the permission to chill or to be with what is. Next, we have the permission to feel all the feels or to be with our full humanity. And finally, the permission to glow in the dark, which is to be with our greatness. I will be your host. My name is Christopher Carter. My friends call me KC. I'm a coach for founders and executives and meditation teacher for organizations. Let's meet this week's guest. Lisa Congdon and I go back a few years. We met at Camp GLP, I believe after her and her wife, Clay, took a red-eye flight straight from Portland to upstate New York. So she was not in the most conversational zone when we met. However, I did win her over the course of a long weekend dressed as a unicorn, and we did hit it off on many levels. What can I tell you about Lisa Congdon that is not already everywhere all over the internet? She has about 300,000 followers for her amazing art on Instagram and in many other places. Her following's everywhere. What you'll realize about it as soon as you see the feed, you could just glance at it and notice that it's so aesthetically pleasing and inspiring and powerful that you'll start following it and loving it and consuming it and buying it and hanging it all over your walls. It's just one of those things that gets in your bones. Lisa is really a humble, wonderful, wise, unassuming, powerful woman. And in conversation, she's actually quite introverted, which is an interesting juxtaposition because her art has so many loud, vibrant colors in it. Her tattoos, I didn't get a chance to ask her this in the interview, but her tattoos, incidentally, are predominantly black and white. I'm going to have to ask her about that the next time we talk. I had the pleasure of working with Lisa closely a few years back on solidifying her meditation practice. She's already been, as you'll soon hear, an incredibly disciplined person in creating her art empire, and meditation practice has just been another unlock key into deepening that discipline practice. She's just really inspiring to watch in how she navigates a very complex, often noisy world like the rest of us. And she does it by getting back to work very quietly, humbly, and just producing this fire hose of creativity. Here's Lisa's formal bio. Illustrator and author Lisa Congdon is best known for her colorful drawings and hand lettering. She works for clients around the world, including Ernie Ball, Crate and Barrel, Facebook, Comme des Garçons, REI, and Harvard University, among many others. She is the author of 8 books, including The Starving Artist Myth-Smashing Art Inc., The Essential Guide to Building Your Career as an Artist, and her latest book, Find Your Artistic Voice, The Essential Guide to Working Your Creative Magic. That's out on Chronicle Books on August 6th, and I believe it's available for pre-order. Lisa was named one of 40 women over 40 to watch in 2015, and she is featured in the 2017 book, 200 Women Who Will Change the Way You See the World. I got to agree with that assessment. She has absolutely changed my view on what is possible online and off. Lisa lives and works in Portland, Oregon. You can find her everywhere online at Lisa Congdon. Please enjoy this far-ranging conversation on building and finding your own community online and off. One of the things I love, incidentally, she recently opened a physical brick and mortar store in Portland, Oregon, and she shares some of the stories of her very diverse global online following that pop in the store on occasion. It's just a really cool blending of online and offline impact. We also get deep into her latest book on artistic voice. We talk about the inner workings of finding that voice and how it evolves over time. And also we get into a secret project she's been chipping away at that she's hopefully going to complete later this summer. Please enjoy this week's conversation. My friend and Shiro, Lisa Congdon, thanks so much for joining me today.
It's so great to be with you.
It's kind of been a while since we properly caught up.
It's been a while. I want to say it's been, well, we've caught up a little bit over email, but not in social media, but we haven't spoken on the phone in a long time.
Right, I know. So why not have a bunch of people listen in for the first time? No pressure.
Right?
No pressure. Well, obviously, I keep close tabs on all of your adventures and what you're working on through your various social channels, and I'm so excited to get into that. But why don't we start with the 3 permissions? This is something we cover on each of our episodes. They are the permission to chill, permission to feel all the feels, which is to access our full humanity, and or permission to glow in the dark. You could interpret these however you wish. Do any of these resonate with you today? And what do the permissions to chill, feel all the feels, or glow in the dark mean to you?
Before we got on the phone, before we started recording, I should say, you and I were catching up a little bit. And I was telling you that I took a coffee date this morning with somebody who I don't know very well, but she was looking for some advice. She wants to publish a children's book. And I don't normally do those kinds of coffee dates because I just don't have time. Consulting isn't really part of my business model. But every now and again, I'll make the time for someone. So I did that this morning. But when that happens, it's like I'm a very routine person. Mm-hmm. So, I get up and I meditate and then I go drink my coffee and have my breakfast and I go work out and then I start my work day. And I really love sort of living in routine. But, every now and again, at least once a week, that gets a little thrown off because I make a commitment to do something else. And today was one of those days. And so it's 11:45 my time, which is, lunchtime-ish. And I'm kind of just getting started with my day because I had this coffee date this morning. And oftentimes when my routine gets thrown off, what happens? I get a little stressed out, a little anxious, right? Like I've got, all these things that, on my to-do list, and normally I would have started them 3 hours ago. And so I think, permission to chill is definitely the one that I sort of need right now and need to remind myself because I know I have plenty of time to do all the things. And I am really working on being present in everything I do in my life. And I have the opportunity to talk to somebody I love very much on his podcast right now.
Yeah, nice.
And just sort of taking a deep breath and being present with you right now, talking about what's going on with me is way more important in the grand scheme of things than checking the things off my to-do list this afternoon. That one's resonating for me right now. And I find myself constantly having to remind myself to just be present and be chill.
Yeah, permission to chill granted, Lisa Congdon. And I would say what you
Okay.
just said was such a great snapshot of my experience of you. It's that you're kind of known for having so much output. There's just like a kind of a steady to fast moving stream of stuff coming from your studio and from your hands. Ever since I got to know you, I was amazed by how committed you are to kind of renegotiating your relationship with time, because it was almost like your output is a given almost, or the demands on it seem to be a given. And it's how you show up in it and seem to make space for it that's really impressive. And it seems like you're always working on that or optimizing it.
Yeah, making shifts. I do think that my relationship to time is sort of been my greatest challenge, but I'm trying to also make it my greatest priority, because being present in my life with whatever I'm doing, whether it's making art or being with other human beings or being with myself, is super important to me. And so if I'm sort of flying through my life without being conscientious about how I'm using my time, or, my relationship to my time, then I'm more than likely going to be miserable, I think. Or my experience is that I'm, the more disconnected I am from being present with time, the more sort of stressed out and anxious I feel. So, so it's something that I'm constantly thinking about, like, how much work am I taking on? What kind of work am I taking on? How am I feeling about the work that I'm taking on? What kind of work matters? Am I doing work that matters? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd love to dig into that a little bit, just to give people a snapshot, because I work with so many aspiring, I don't want to call them directly aspiring Lisa Congdons, but let's face it, we are all kind of aspiring Lisa Congdons on some level. Your story is so inspiring, picking up or getting serious about becoming an artist was the age 32?
Well, what's interesting is I never considered myself an artistic person at all. Like, in fact, growing up, I was not an artist. I was my mom, who I love dearly, and I think she would probably take this back with every cell of her being. At one point when I was a little kid, said my brother and sister were being tested for the gifted and talented program at school. And I asked her why I hadn't been tested. And she said, well, you're not gifted. You're a hard worker. And so,
Wow. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, I know. And again, I'm sure my mother would take that back with every ounce of her being if she could. And I think what she wanted to say to me was, she didn't necessarily see me as this creative person, but she was trying to tell me that I had another gift, which was that I worked really hard. Parents say all kinds of things to their kids they think are actually going to be helpful that are not. And my parents were no exception. And they loved me very much. And, I think they now sort of realize that I was sort of pigeonholed as a certain type of kid. But in my mind, when I heard that, I heard, oh, I'm not artistic. Even though, when I gotten to be in my 20s, I started having sort of artistic urges, and was actually in a relationship with somebody for a really long time who was an artist and who introduced me to this whole world of art and design that I became enamored with. But it wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I gave myself permission to sort of explore it myself. In that exploration, I started drawing and painting, as I like to say, like, even after I was truly being artistic, I still didn't consider myself an artist or really an artistic person. I was just somebody who was messing around with, paint and having fun. Eventually that shifted, and, the internet happened, and I love the internet for the community that you can find there. And I just started looking for other people who were making similar things as me. And this was way before Instagram or anything. So this was like back in the day of Flickr.
Oh, Flickr, yeah.
and the infancy of blogs and all of that. And I started a blog, and, pretty soon I started making stuff and sharing it and making friends who were also making stuff and sharing it. And it's kind of like what we all experience now on the internet, except it was very, 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 very small group of people, relatively speaking, right? Hundreds as opposed to millions. That whole experience of being a creative person and sharing my work with other people and sort of consuming other people's creativity became so important to me and kind of gave me life in a way that nothing ever had before. And so I started drawing and painting when I was in my early 30s, but I didn't actually make a career of it until I was almost 40, because it took me years to I never went to school for it, so I had to practice to get decent at it. But it eventually turned into something. And I think part of that was I was so motivated by the experience of doing something that was gratifying to me in a way that nothing I had ever done had been before.
Sure.
That I was like, I want to do this. I don't necessarily need to be, super successful. I want to do this enough that I can pay my bills. My relationship to time, as we were talking about before, has always been something that is a huge part of how I walk through the world. And I had learned really great time management skills in my previous jobs because I was working as a project manager, working in the nonprofit world. And I transferred a lot of this sort of thinking around how to organize my time over to my art practice because I sort of had these learned business and communication and time management skills from working for so many years. And I had this newfound artistic talent. The merging of those lent itself to building a business pretty quickly.
It seems like there's a huge factor of discipline in everything that you do.
Yes.
There's a practice, there's a discipline, there's like a fierce commitment to show up and do it.
That's right. Like my mom said, I am a hard worker. That is gosh darn true.
And looking back at your entire canon of work and everything you've created with your career, if you had to go back and choose and you could only have one, whether to be gifted or to be a hard worker, what would you choose?
Well, it's really, no one has ever asked me that question before. So I haven't really thought about it. Fortunately, I don't have to choose. Honestly, I do think that, there's also a third component, which is my deep desire to connect with people. And I also think that has helped make me successful. When I think about that deep desire to sort of connect or make a difference in the world and my artistic talent, my creative gifts, and then my sort of sense of discipline and my ability to kind of manage a lot of projects at once, I think about all three of those things and they all matter so much.
Sure. So
it's really hard to choose. And like in some ways, I feel like that is the formula for me. I made a Venn diagram the other day, which actually wasn't those three things, but it was three other things. I have to try to find it.
Did you make it in PowerPoint or did you actually draw it with your hands?
I drew it. And then I posted it on Instagram. So it's there somewhere.
But check it out.
But I also think there could be a different Venn diagram, which is the Venn diagram that I'm referring to that I drew the other day was more like what motivates me.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're talking about is maybe what's helped me to become the version of successful that I've become. And I think it is all of those things because you could be super talented and gifted, but if you're not interested in connecting with people, or you're just not that interested in, or you're super right brain and you can't, organization and time management is not your thing. Like it's going to be harder for you to build and maintain an art career. There's some combination of things that lend themselves to people's success, and everybody's success formula is a little different. And some people are stronger in one area than another, but it's never one thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It's interesting how those strong points that you have as far as focus, consistency, patience, and persistence in a lot of ways, how those translate so well to connecting with people and building a following long term. I would imagine you are every bit as consistent as you were starting out, or were you? Did it change over time?
Yeah, no, definitely. And one of the things I learned early on in terms of building community around my work is that consistency is really important. I don't teach social media habits and ideas very often, but I spoke at a conference recently and they really wanted me to talk about social media. So I was like, okay. And, I think what people are expecting me to say is, here's how to make perfect photos. And, and what I was really talking about is like, if you want to build a following and connect with your audience, you got to talk about stuff that people are interested in, which means talking about yourself, like be a real person, talk about your range of experiences, engage people in conversation about stuff that matters to you or that you think matters to them. That's relevant. I hate the word be nice or the words be nice. Be cool. Like show up for people and don't do it once a week. Do it every day, 5 days a week. People need to know that you're there and it doesn't happen overnight. You have to work at it. And that's one thing I did. I posted consistently for years. I mean, in the last couple of years, the focus of my work has changed a bit because I have realized that I need to be making work in a world that feels so scattered, and I've realized I need to make work that is meaningful to me and other people. That didn't matter to me as much before. That shift happened. But I've always sort of posted consistently, engaged with people who are interested in my work, shared parts of my process, talked about what's going well and also what's not going well. And I think people see me as someone who's real. I have a shop here in Portland now, and it's only open 2 days a week, but I get people who come visit me from all over the world because they're traveling in Portland. Like I I do get a lot of locals too, but like I would say the vast majority of people who come in here are tourists. It's crazy because my shop is not in a commercial district.
Destination.
In an area that's just a lot of art studios. Yeah. So it's a destination. Exactly. And people walk in and they're like, oh my God, I feel like I know you.
Wow.
And you don't know one thing about me. And, you know, truth be told, people don't really know me because everybody chooses what to share and what not to share. And even those of us who are more vulnerable online, we're still curating what we say and how much we say, and it needs to be that way. You have to have some level of privacy. I think it sets up an interesting, sometimes awkward, but mostly really amazing thing for me. I get these people who come in and are like, this thing you said changed my life, or I really connect with your work, or this book you wrote on becoming a working artist really helps me get started. And I'm in this really unique, amazing opportunity where I get to influence all of these people who have this positive association of me that I don't even know. And so it's a gift for me when they actually walk through my door and I can give them a hug. What do you do? What's your story? Like, one thing I wasn't really expecting with the store, like I just wanted to sell some shit.
Yeah.
But what's happening is people are walking in and pouring their hearts out to me, and it's really awesome. You know, at this juncture, like 284,000 followers. I don't know those 284,000 people. I knew some of them, but a very, 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 very small percentage. You know, a lot of those people are regular users of, you know, consumers of social media and follow me and comment on all my posts. And so when I get to actually meet those people in real life and connect with them, I've made some really amazing relationships and learned some really amazing things.
It makes me think that and this is one of the things I noticed about you, is that your art is kind of meta in that there's the work itself, which is super colorful and vibrant and looks good on every wall, and it's great. And there's the art of just using that stream of conscious, letting people in the process, social media connection piece that just seems to be really meaningful for you too. For a lot of people that have a business, social media is kind of a necessary evil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yours seems really integrated into the art itself. Like there's an art of kind of being you and being open to connecting with people and helping them on their path.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I think there are a lot of people who use social media in that way. But what I personally had to do to get there was way back in the day before Instagram, I was like on Twitter, right? And I remember when Twitter was the thing. It was like before even really Facebook. I had a Facebook fan page, but way back in the beginning, I remember I would like write a blog post and then tweet about it. And I remember I felt kind of icky, like, to the, you know, whatever 50 people that followed me at the time. I would be like, hey, look at what I made today, or like read my story of this process or whatever. And I always felt like had to be my own pimp. That's what often creative entrepreneurship feels like. It's like this constant, you know, hey, look what I have to offer. Like,
right.
Look what I made.
Bugging people.
You know, you're constantly having to draw attention to yourself. And it doesn't always feel good. And so I think for a lot of people, it's just like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't have anything worthwhile to say, or I don't, you know, who am I? Or, you know, it just, and I realized early on, like, if I'm going to use this, and I had no other connections to the world of art and design, so I was completely relying on myself, I have to figure out a way to do this in a way that feels good and that I enjoy. And so I tried to make blogging and eventually Facebook and Instagram. I don't really use Twitter anymore, but like I had to make them things that felt normal and natural and authentic. And so part of what I've been working on over the last, I mean, it's always a work in progress. Like, even since I've known you, like I've made major shifts in how I use social media because I'm always sort of keeping myself in check about how I'm using it and what my expectations are. And because it can be this place of judgment or perceived judgment or, you know, comparison. And so your relationship to it, in order to use it as often as I do, needs to feel good and natural, right? And so that's something I've been working on a lot.
What would you recommend to somebody who's where you were starting out, getting their initial following and trying to find a good balance between spending time in there but not getting sucked into the comparison and all the nastiness of it?
I really had to do some soul searching. I didn't actually start to feel the ickiness of it until, or like at least the comparison part, until I started to grow a following, because it was before I was just a regular person on Instagram who was posting pictures of her cat and whatever.
Yeah.
I remember I was already a working artist when I joined Instagram, but I wasn't thinking of it as a promotional tool. I was thinking of it as catch up with my friends, kind of like Facebook. And Instagram has really become a professional tool for a lot of people. And eventually my feed became almost entirely professional. Not that I don't post personal anecdotes, because I do. And I also have like a private personal account for my friends. Although now with Instagram stories, like, let's never even use my personal account because I just post boring personal
so
stuff in stories.
Right.
I started to feel really bad about myself. I think people, who observe me are surprised to hear that, because I think I come across as this person who's got it all figured out a lot. And that's not necessarily because I'm cocky, but because I'm 51 and I've gained some wisdom over the years, and I talk about things in a very plain spoken way. And, but I still struggle, not as much as I did even 2 years ago, but I reached this point where I was like, I got to stop worrying about making posts that are going to get a lot of likes, or like I need to post the stuff that feels important to me, that I got to post about stuff that matters in my life. And I started posting more about politics, actually, because it was, something that was becoming more important for me after the
2016 election.
Yeah. Right? And I got to be braver about that, because some people are not going to like that. I got to speak my truth. And I wasn't doing a whole lot of that. I was just posting mostly pretty pictures of things. I'm gay, so I was out and everything. I wasn't not being political at all, but I was on a much smaller scale. I wasn't telling as many personal stories. I was on my blog, but I was not really doing that on Instagram so much. And a couple of years ago, I just was like, I got to stop worrying what other people think. I got to stop worrying about losing followers. I got to stop worrying about how many likes I get and how much engagement I have. I'm just going to post the stuff. If I have nothing, I think I even said this to you a couple of years ago. I said, unless I have something to say, I'm not going to post anything. I threw aside my consistency rule of posting every day. Now it feels like I have something important to say almost every day, because I've gotten in the habit of thinking about what I want to say to the world. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that. But at the time, I would sometimes only post 2 or 3 days a week. I had to feel fully behind whatever I was posting. And what ended up happening was that ironically, I started getting more engagement around the stuff that I was posting, because it was coming from this different place inside of me. It was like I wasn't trying. That's not what I was going for. I was just going for more like authenticity, but ended up realizing that that's what was resonating for people.
Yeah.
I have a day where I have nothing to share, then I don't share anything. And that's my rule.
Did you notice as you were starting to step into more of your authentic voice in your social sharing, was the art and your work evolving alongside it?
Yeah. So I started making more work with messages that reflected the stuff that I was struggling with, even my struggles with social media. So I was even posting about what I was going through and how social media was affecting me. And so many people were like, me too, me too, me too, me too.
That's so cool.
I also started to put blinders on. If an account of somebody that I feel is somewhere on a similar path as me, and that person's account, looking at it makes me feel bad because they seem to be, quote, doing better, I give myself, this seems silly now because now I follow everybody and I've really gotten to a place where I'm not affected in the same way. But, a few years ago, I was going through this really insecure period. And so I started kind of really monitoring who I was following. Am I looking at stuff that's helping me in my journey? And if anything isn't helping, if it's making me feel insecure or whatever, it doesn't mean that person is doing anything wrong. It's about me and my feelings. So I'm going to unfollow. Also, only looking at stuff that made me feel inspired. And I've actually refollowed a ton of people that I unfollowed.
I go through those same waves all the time. It's so funny.
And it's like, I realize how far I've come because I was going through this period where I was just comparing myself a lot. That person has the same amount of followers as me and their posts are getting so much more engagement. Like, what am I doing wrong? Instead of just focusing on my own path and my own voice and really being grateful for what I had, not what I didn't have. And it was funny because once I started doing that, then I started to care less. I really made this internal transition. to focusing on my own journey and my own path. And that's something I talk a lot about now with other people. If you can get your, focus on your own voice and your own path and what you have to say, and focus less on what other people are doing, it will help you tremendously. And it actually eventually will get you to the place where you can love and appreciate what other people are doing in a really full way. I feel like I came full circle, but I had to go through that process. And so I recommend that people really think about, when I'm engaging in social media, which shouldn't be all the time, by the way.
Sure.
But when I'm on my phone, what am I looking at and how am I taking it in and how's it making me feel? And really curating what you look at, not just what you're putting out, but what you're taking in and how you're engaging with those people.
Yeah, I always recommend to people to watch their inputs, to pay attention to the things that trigger you or make you feel terrible. You just have to, we're consuming all of that. So you touched on artistic voice. I definitely want to get into your latest book that comes out this summer, Find Your Artistic Voice, The Essential Guide to Working Your Creative Magic. Kind of looking back over the many books you've written, I don't know how many you're up to now, like
8.
8 books.
8.
Wow.
8, but I'm working on a few more.
Of course, you're always working on a couple. I felt like you had two come out the same year that we were close, like back in 2017, right?
I did.
Yeah, and it's funny, just a quick little side note about your book for women over 40, A Glorious Freedom, Older Women Leading Extraordinary Lives. You sent me a signed copy, and I have mailed that signed copy out to women in their 40s who are, starting a new endeavor, starting a business, and they always completely adore the book and start obsessing over Lisa Congdon, but then they mail it back to me. So this book is boomeranged around the country like a bunch of times.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And I haven't, I feel like I always kind of thumb through. I always pick it up for just very spot inspiration. I haven't read it cover to cover. I always just find like, oh, let me learn about this person. Let me learn about this person. Because I know I wasn't the exact demographic for the book, not being a woman, but I find that book to be so powerful for women.
Thank you.
Back to artistic voice. I'm wondering any thoughts on why this topic came up for you now at this stage of your career versus, because it seems kind of fundamental to getting started on the path of becoming a professional artist. So I wondered what kind of brought it up at this stage of your career.
Well, I did this thing a couple of years ago on Instagram where I was thinking about creating sort of like instructional modules around topics that pique my audience. And a big part of my audience are aspiring artists. Like I have a lot of people who follow me who are not artists at all or not aspiring artists, and a lot of people who are established already if they are artists. But I do have a big chunk of my following fall in that category. And so I was keeping a blog at the time, and I was also starting to develop some classes. And so I didn't have a book in mind, but I was like, what are you interested in? And I did a survey once, I think it was in 2015 or 16. And one of the things that came up was like, how do you find your voice? And some people call it style, although their style is a part of voice, but voice is not entirely style. But people are really interested in like how you become a person creatively who has this distinct point of view, whether you're a musician or a dancer or a writer or a visual artist. You have this thing that you become known for that's recognizably yours. And how does that happen? And like, how long does it take? And this was a question that was coming at me from so many people. And I realized I don't necessarily know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I think I have some ideas about it, but I don't know. So at one point, I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago about, I just finished a book that's 30,000 words, but the blog post was probably, I don't know, a few hundred, just this dense few paragraphs on like, here's what I think it means to have a voice, and here's how you develop one. And my editor, I worked with the same amazing editor at Chronicle Books for many years, and she read my blog at the time, and she emailed me, and actually A Glorious Freedom also came out of a blog post that my editor read. So
okay.
That blog was like,
she knows what she's
my
doing.
My editor would read my blog and she'd be like, this is not a blog post, this is a book.
When she says that to you, are you like, wow, that's awesome? Or you're like, oh, wow, I got to write 40,000 more words or whatever?
No, I was excited.
Yeah.
And in fact, she has suggested other things to me that I've been like, no thanks. So for sure. So anyway, I was down, but I realized, I still have to do some research and think this through, because while I knew a lot already, based on my own experience, like I wanted to learn what other people thought, and I needed to read about creativity, and I needed to explore sort of how the brain works and develops creatively, and I needed to interview other artists. And so I just started on this journey of sort of trying to figure that out. This was before I even decided I was going to do the book. And then once I kind of spent a month or two thinking like, okay, this is what I could write about under the topic of voice, I realized it was doable and it was important and it was like all of the things that people had questions about. So the book essentially, like there's an introduction, which, is basically me telling, kind of explaining the rationale for the book. The interesting thing about being a creative person is that finding your voice is your holy grail. It's the place that we all want to end up. And yet, unlike athletes who are training toward a goal, there's no shared definition for artistic greatness. Your artistic greatness is actually supposed to be different than mine, and it's supposed to be different than somebody else's. There are genres and families of, artists who make similar work, but like what gives you a voice is actually your distinctness, not your sameness. So, in a lot of sports, by contrast, like you're training to get, run a certain amount of miles in less than a certain number of minutes or seconds or whatever, right? Or
standard metrics and measures.
Yeah. Like it's very it's this very concrete thing. And for artists, it's this very amorphous thing. And so a lot of people get overwhelmed by it. Training is very similar. You have to show up and do the work in order to become a better artist, just like you have to become a better swimmer or runner or whatever. But like the end goal is what makes my voice distinct and great is different than what makes yours great. Where in athletics, it's, there's some artistry in athletics, but, there's also a lot of very concrete, measurable stuff.
Was there any point in your career, like early on, can you think of any particular piece of your work or a collection of work where you thought, oh, wow, this is the holy grail, I'm finding my voice? Like it felt very definitive at some point?
Yeah, there's definitely I talk about it in the book in chapter 3. There's the chapter is actually called The Past, because I feel like what happens for most people is you're working. And then you develop this, you may not be thinking, oh, I found my voice, but you enter this period where you're floating around. The analogy I use is floating around in your own sort of orbiting your own sun or whatever, where you're you have some creative flow, things just become, there's always struggle, but it's kind of like learning a language. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, if you've ever tried to learn another language, something goes off and you're fluent. Conversations become easier. You can read the menu. Mm-hmm. Becoming an artist is not that different, right? You're working on your skills, and all of a sudden they become easier because of the discipline that you've put into learning the thing, which feels so clumsy at first, sometimes for years. And for me, it was this period of time where things were flowing out of me more easily. And like I said, there's always a little bit of struggle as an artist because we're always pushing ourselves to the next level. But there's these periods that we go through where we're there's a certain amount of ease and flow. And I think those are signs that you're finding your voice. And you kind of know when you start making a lot of work that hangs together really well. You're using a lot of the same colors and symbols and signs in your work, and and all of that is sort of flowing out of you naturally. And that, again, that can take years, but that happened for me, and I remember that. And then, we often decide we want to change things up, and then we go back into a learning curve again. We want to try a new medium, or we want to change our style up because we're bored. I mean, that's the tricky thing about finding your voice, is that it makes it sound as though it's something sort of fixed and final, and it's not. It's It's this thing that's always evolving and changing. And it comes with constantly working and showing up for your work. So there's a certain amount of discipline involved. And then there's this figuring out how to move through fear and discomfort, because the creative process is inherently messy and unpredictable and intimidating, especially if you're being public with your work, which many artists who are trying to be working artists, you have to be. You have to put your art into the world in order to make a living at it. And so moving through fear and getting comfortable with discomfort and hanging in there, because, it's millions of people, everyone's creative, and millions of people have amazing ideas, but so many people don't pursue them because they're terrified of rejection or of not doing it right or of failing. Another sort of aspect of finding your voice is sticking in there long enough with the fear and discomfort to get, to progress. And I do think there are concrete things you can do, not just to move through fear, but to develop your voice. And so the book also talks a lot about like practical advice for moving the process along,
What would you say are the main components of your voice these days? I would imagine like our speaking voices growing up, your voice continues to evolve and expand. What aspects of your work lately would you say are a big part of your voice? Oh, in case in point, I loved the I think it was the May issue of Parents magazine. Gorgeous African-American woman on the cover, but I see your hand-lettered fonts, and I was like, that is Lisa Congdon. I knew it before.
Well, that's really funny.
Yeah, I knew it before I knew it, but I would say...
that you bring that up because
yeah.
I have like this very distinct hand lettering style.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because a lot of people who are known as hand letterers, they hand letter in like a million different styles. That's what they do, right? In fact, I'm going to a hand lettering conference this weekend, and like most of the people at that conference are unlike me. Their whole job is to make things that don't necessarily look recognizable as theirs, right? They're trying to like work with clients to like make stuff that looks sort of different every time. And I've kind of built a career around having one or two very distinct hand lettering styles. And it's funny you mentioned the Parent magazine cover because I got so many DMs on Instagram from people being like, this person copied your style.
Somebody, yeah.
And I was like, no, that's actually mine, but thank you. It was so reaffirming. I have been influenced by other artists. It's always better to have more than one influence because when you sort of meld all your influences together, they become something new and different, even though, there's little bits and pieces of all of us in other artists. And there are people who are influenced by me, and the flow continues out into the world. Elizabeth Gilbert talks about that and how we need to start looking at that. I mean, you don't want to blatantly copy anybody's work and sell it for profit as your own, but like this idea that that there's this like zeitgeist out there of creative thought and ideas that just sort of swirl around in the universe, and we're all sort of picking and choosing from them. And like, that's why so much work that looks similar comes out at the same time. And it's not that people are literally sitting down and copying each other. It's that we're all sort of influenced by similar things. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of my own voice right now, I definitely am heavy into my own sort of hand lettering. I also make a lot of work that has messages in it around stuff that I'm working on in my own life. I'm a little different than some people who proselytize about, the way to live your life, in that everything I post about that's like has anything to do with advice or life lessons or are all things I'm working on. And
Sure.
I'm usually really explicit about that
Right.
because I'm not an expert. It's more like, this is my experience and here's what I've learned, or here's something I'm struggling with or working on. And so a lot of my art expresses that kind of stuff. I also am like heavy into symbolism. So I make a lot of work that doesn't have words in it and is just symbolic stuff for me. And as you mentioned before, I use a lot of really bright colors and I have a color palette that's very distinct. So I would say my color palette is a huge part of my voice, because even when the shape of my work changes over time, my color palette has remained very consistent. So.
Just very vibrant, bold colors.
Yes. And I lived a lot of the earlier part of my adulthood being really depressed. And so I've been like a happily, proudly happy person. I definitely go through periods where I'm struggling, but I've been living as an outwardly joyful person for the last 15 years. And one of the things that has been really important to me is expressing that. It's almost like I'm making up for the rest of my life before. That is one thing that I think helps connect my work to people who, like, it brings a ray of brightness to people who need it and want it.
I think it gives people permission to experience that for themselves. Like, that's that permission to glow in the dark thing. Jonathan Fields, a mutual friend of ours, he has a couple big pieces of your work hanging in the Good Life Project podcast studio. And I usually sleep in there when I'm in New York City. It just brings me so much joy. Like when the sunlight comes in there and I have his vibe in there and I have your art in my face, it's like, how can I have a bad day at that point? When the world took a darker turn politically in 2016, and let's face it, our country in so many ways, regardless of what side you're on, the discourse just went down the toilet. I feel like your reaction to that was to go bolder and brighter and insert a lot more hope. Was that intentional, or is that just the evolution?
Yeah, and I have made a few pieces that are a handful of pieces that are more dark for sure, and those would really come out of some anger that I've had. But yeah, by choice, I have really tried to express what I'm for and celebrating what's important to me more than I'm F Trump or whatever, which is some people's shtick, and that's fine. There's a place for that. I definitely am like, I want more of this, so I'm going to make more of it in the world because I feel like that I'm able to change more minds that way, I think. And using joy as an antidote is okay. It's not only okay, it's necessary.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes right along with part of your mission of connecting with people too. It's building a bridge to people that they want to walk across, built on something aspirational and hopeful versus just pointing out. There's plenty of social media out there that'll point out like how broken the world is. Oh, actually, it's not even social media. It's just media. As we come full circle here, we play this quick game called isms. And isms are just one reflection you would offer an aspiring person. And I'm just going to bang through these quick. We're going to call these Congdonisms. That's a hard word to say. Congdonisms. What's one reflection you would offer an aspiring professional artist starting out at the age of 32?
Be patient. I actually had a 32-year-old in here on Friday. I was rushed in at the last hour in my open hours in my shop. And she rushed in and she said, I'm so glad you're here. I've been wanting to tell you that I'm 32 and I just figured out this is what I need to do. But I realize I have so far to go. I don't have a business. I haven't found my voice yet. I just know I need to do it. It's basically the person you're talking about. And the first thing I told her is take a deep breath. Because you feel at 32 like you've already missed. Her energy was, I'm so excited to have figured this out, but I'm already 32, and I don't want to waste any more time. And so my message to her was, A, it's not too late. There are women who are 72 and just now having that realization. Yeah. A, and B, like the more you try to rush it, the more bad decisions you're going to make and the less fun you're going to have. So slow down, be patient, do the work, and it will happen for you eventually. Just be patient, slow down, and loosen the grip. Go easy on yourself. This isn't going to happen overnight. Enjoy the process, because once you get to be a person who's making money from their work, and you're actually being this productive person, you inherently won't have as much fun because you're going to be doing the work of running a business. So enjoy this part of figuring out who you are as a creative person, and don't rush it because it is the most precious time. So enjoy it.
Oh, it's so powerful. It's kind of like once you decide to follow the thing or the dream, it's that season of discovery, and you don't want to slam the door on that in pursuit of the next thing. Because like you said, once all that work starts showing up, you have different types of problems at that point.
Right.
Oh, that's great. What would you say to an artist, one reflection you would offer an artist who wants to incorporate more either authentic voice or activism into their work?
I would suggest that person do a lot of soul searching about what their values are. So I'm a super values driven person. In fact, I'm coming up with a new product with a friend of mine around a values exercise, because to me it is. Yeah, I'll actually get in touch with you later, Casey, to tell you more about it.
This makes so much sense for you, Lisa, because if it's not art that you're cranking out, it's like epic bike rides or time with your wife or time with your pets. You live your values every single day, every minute.
That's right. And so I'm not always perfect at it, but everything from my relationships, the people I choose to spend time with, boundaries around my life, everything is driven by my values. And if you are not in touch with what you stand for or what's important to you or recognizing what drives you and motivates you, it's going to be really hard for you to even express your authentic voice. So understanding who you are, what your values are, and then sort of figuring out of those values, what can you express through your art? And what's the best way to do that? Sometimes it's with words, sometimes it's with pictures, sometimes it's with both. Doing a values assessment, what's important to me, and what's the most important to me. And then, that I use that to drive what I make work about. But it helps me make every decision in my life. Is this thing that I'm about to do or sign up for aligned with my values?
And what would you offer an aspiring author? You're 8 books into your writing career. It doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. It's just going to keep speeding up. You have this knack of living on short deadlines for, social posts and other stuff you're turning out, but also you kind of exist constantly in longer term projects and bigger deadlines. Like what would you say to an aspiring author who wants to publish a book?
I think the first thing is just what you said, like to understand that most book projects are very long term. And then in fact, I've been working on one book. Now this is a little on the unusual side, but I've been working on one book that I'm in my 3rd year of it. I think it'll be done by the end of the summer. It's a big book. So
what's this book? What's the topic?
It's a book on the periodic table of elements for kids. And so it's like an encyclopedia, basically. I know. Science. Yeah. So anyway, I think that understanding that the sort of immediate gratification thing that a lot of us need doesn't necessarily get satisfied with the book. Mm-hmm. You have to really love the topic, or you have to really love the story. And you have to be committed to the start to finish process, which is also often really painful because the editing process, unless you self-publish, like if you are working with a publishing house, like you will have to get feedback and make changes. And I love being edited, but in the beginning I was like, what?
How dare you? How dare you touch my words?
Exactly. And then, like pace yourself, get yourself on a schedule to get it done. Because obviously you have to get the book deal, which is a whole other thing.
Right.
But once you have the deal, it takes a lot of discipline to show up. And because oftentimes, like, I'm really excited about the book in the beginning, and then it's like 6 months in and I'm still not done. And I'm like, I have to get up today and work on this thing that I'm kind of bored with. But in the end, it's always worth it. I'm at the tail end of 2 books right now, so I'm feeling it.
Yeah, and then you get to go out and celebrate with the book tours and all the talks I'm sure you're going to be giving. That's great.
Yes.
It's not a bad summer to be Lisa Congdon, I don't think.
No. It's books.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time today. I always get so much inspiration and very practical advice on how to build an epic career and epic life from you. So thanks a lot, Lisa.
You're welcome, and thanks for having me. This was a total pleasure.
And thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. If you know somebody who would benefit or enjoy it, please, by all means, forward it along. You could also pop on over to iTunes and leave us a review. Your feedback is so important to us. Until next week,